What does a defensive weapon look like when the flash of its first use is brighter than the sun? That was the question I asked myself the morning the sirens screamed, not in mourning, but in rehearsal. A routine drill, they told us, just another calm reminder that everything was under control, that the weapons hidden beneath concrete and steel were there to protect us. I remember standing by the window, coffee untouched, watching the sky as if it might blink back at me. Somewhere, far beyond the horizon, missiles slept in their silos like coiled animals. We were told they were guardians, silent shields, instruments of peace. But no shield in history ever needed the power to erase cities. That was the first crack in the story we were told, and once you see the crack, you can never stop watching it widen. I was born into certainty. By the time I was old enough to read newspapers, the world had already been divided neatly into sides, us and them, good and evil, democracy and annihilation. At least, that's how the headlines framed it. At school, we practiced duck and cover drills beneath wooden desks that could barely hold a stock of books, let alone protect against the fire of a nuclear blast. Still, we believed. We believed because belief was easier than fear, because our leaders spoke calmly on black and white television screens, assuring us that the weapons pointed at the enemy were purely defensive, a last resort, a guarantee that war would never come. The phrase they used was deterrence, a beautiful word, clean, scientific, safe. The logic sounded flawless. If everyone had the power to destroy the world, no one would dare press the button. Mutual assured destruction, they called it, as if promising mutual suicide somehow guaranteed life. In my town, factories thrived on defense contracts. Families depended on missile guidance systems the way farmers once depended on rain. Churches prayed for peace while blessing the hands that built warheads. The contradiction didn't bother us yet, because no bombs were falling, because we were still alive. The first time I truly questioned the lie, it wasn't during a crisis. It was during a celebration. I was working as a junior analyst then, buried deep in a government building that smelled of paper, metal, and quiet panic. That day, champagne bottles popped in conference rooms. A successful test, they said, a new generation of warheads, smaller, smarter, more precise. More defensive, my supervisor joked, raising his glass. I didn't laugh, because the numbers on my desk told a different story. Yield calculations, blast radii, casualty estimates that climbed into the millions with the adjustment of a decimal point. This wasn't defense. This was refinement, optimization. The weapons were no longer just deterrence. They were being improved. Soon after, the rhetoric changed. Nuclear weapons weren't just to prevent war anymore. They were to manage it, to control escalation, to fight and win limited nuclear exchanges. That's when fear slipped into the language. If you plan for a war, you eventually convince yourself it's fightable. And if it's fightable, someone will try. The crisis came fast, like all real disasters do. A misinterpreted signal, a radar anomaly, a false alarm that lived for only a few minutes, but those minutes stretched into an eternity. Phones rang without voices on the other end. Orders were drafted, revised, and almost sent. I watched senior officials argue in whispers, their faces drained of color. Men who had spent careers talking about controlled destruction suddenly realized what it meant to be responsible for the end of everything they loved. Outside, the city continued breathing. Cars moved, children laughed. People had no idea how close the world was to vanishing between heartbeats. That's when the truth became undeniable. Defensive nuclear weapons only work as long as humans are perfect, and humans never are. The systems designed to protect us demanded instant decisions under unbearable pressure. There was no room for doubt, no room for error. The price of hesitation was annihilation. The price of action was the same. We had built a machine that punished both courage and restraint. That night, I walked home under a sky that felt heavier than usual. Every star looked like a watching eye. I imagined missiles rising from silos across the planet, their paths crossing like threads in a tapestry of fire. All because we had told ourselves this was safety. The climax didn't arrive with explosions. It arrived with silence. A single officer, young, exhausted, shaking, refused to confirm a launch alert. The data said attack. His instincts said error. Protocol demanded obedience. He chose doubt. Those few minutes of hesitation saved the world. Later, the incident was buried, classified, reduced to a footnote that historians might someday uncover. No monuments were built. No speeches were given. Admitting how close we came would have shattered the myth completely. Because if the public understood that survival depended not on weapons, but on human restraint and luck, the entire narrative would collapse. I remember sitting alone afterward, hands trembling, realizing that our planet had been spared not by deterrence, but by disobedience. The most defensive act in nuclear history was someone refusing to act. That was the moment I stopped believing the lie entirely. I'm older now. The weapons are still there, hidden beneath newer layers of technology and rhetoric. They're quieter, faster, more accurate, still called defensive, still described as necessary. But I've seen behind the curtain. Nuclear weapons do not defend nations. They hold humanity hostage. They replace diplomacy with fear and mistake terror for stability. They don't prevent war. They normalize the idea that total destruction is an acceptable risk. The dangerous lie behind defensive nuclear weapons isn't just that they protect us, it's that they teach us to live as if extinction is an ordinary policy choice. We survived the last century, not because of these weapons, but in spite of them, because of moments of doubt, because of people who hesitated, because of luck we don't deserve. And luck, I've learned, is not a defense strategy. The question that opened my life, what does a defensive weapon look like, still has only one answer. If it can end the world, it was never built to save it.